So state-of-the-art development does not take people away from their work to develop. It actually involves helping people learn more fully from their shared work individually and collectively. And this gets to the notion of using experience for development. A lot of money is invested in people, in sending people off to programs to become better leaders, which I won't get into much detail, but I think has its issues. And I think there's a lot of wasted money in sending people to residential leadership development programs when they come back as changed individuals into an unchanged system. It's like change management 101. Come on, people. And you come back, you're excited, you want to work on things, and your boss is like, nah, I liked you the way you were. And it happens more often that there's no support when you come back for that, right? So how can we embed learning and development on the job? And one way that organizations of all kinds do this is like giving people assignments, stretch assignments, challenge assignments. And this experience is thought to develop them as leaders. But I have another quote here from W. Edward Deming. Experience without theory teaches nothing. We give people experience, and we don't give them any help in understanding this experience. And the research is very clear that it's not easy to learn from experience. And yet we think that it's just a natural that if you give somebody an experience, they're going to learn, and they're going to learn what you want them to learn from that experience. So Deming's not talking about, studying Maslow's hierarchy or some, book on motivational theory or leadership theory. He's really talking about what's your intrinsic theory of leadership. What's your operating system? You all have one. What's your operating system when it comes to leadership? If that doesn't come immediately to mind, you got to reflect on that. I want to put up a handful of assumptions here, and I just want you to self-reflect. To what extent do you agree with these assumptions? Leadership is an art and not a science. Leaders are born and not made. Leadership is based on a formal position. Experience is the only real training for leadership. Strengths-based leadership development works. And leadership is rare and exclusive. So these are 5 assumptions about leadership that I won't say are wrong, but they are limited and limiting. There is no right or wrong leadership theory. I mean, there's the wars in academia that have been going on for decades about which is the right theory of leadership. It's authentic leadership, transformational leadership. No, it's servant leadership. No, it's gonzo leadership. No, it's leadership from Mussolini. There's all of these theories of leadership that people are arguing which one is right. And the answer is they all have something to say in them. Some have more evidence behind them than others. The implications for leadership development is we need to be pragmatic, and we not need to be dogmatic, which means we need to take from those theories that have something that we think we can use and not assume that any one theory is going to solve all of our problems. There's no leadership panacea out there. But the good news is there's a lot of theories to choose from, and there's something to say for most, if not all of them. To me, leadership is a choice. You can choose to be a leader or a more effective leader and work on being a better leader, or you don't. But if you choose to be a leader and a better leader, you're taking on a responsibility. It's an awesome responsibility because it's a responsibility for other people around you. And we know, one of the truisms in organizations is what? People don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, right? They quit their leaders who aren't being effective in one way or another, and usually not being supportive. So when we talk about leadership and developing leadership, it comes down first to you to make a choice. Is this something that I want to do? And if it's a yes, then am I willing to take on that responsibility of being a leader. So core principles of leader development. Experience drives leader development, but learning from experience is not easy. We need to use ongoing experiences that augment the kinds of programs or events that organizations spend a lot of time with. And you need to have personal, you need to own it. You need to own it. You want to be a better leader, and if you're in a large organization, more likely than not, they have something called a high potential program. How many people in one of these organizations are considered to be high potential, or what percentage? Well, I'll tell you, about 3%, 5% maybe. What are the rest of the people? Us, schmucks. We're cannon fodder, I guess. If you're going to sit around and wait for your company to develop you, you're not going anywhere. You got to own your development and look for experiences that can challenge you and make you better, which means there's some understanding of what you do well, what you do less well, and how you're going to move forward. You need to own your development. Experiences don't just happen to us. We create our experiences. Create experiences that can develop you. Practice to become an expert leader. Well, practice in any domain has been studied extensively. A minimum of 10 years or 10,000 hours of dedicated practice to become an expert. I think this applies to leadership as well, and you're not going to find it by going to a series of programs. You've got to do this on your own outside of a formal classroom or development context. You've got to do it every day on your job. How am I working on my leadership every day? A story around this, a very high-functioning leader who I had the privilege to know in Australia, who was the commander of the SAS, the Strategic Air Service. So the Special Forces of Australia. And this is a guy you would think, he's already on top of everything, leadership. But his smartphone was programmed, so when he woke up, he would look at the message, leadership in everything I do today. Not just leadership at work, not just leadership, doing that. Leadership in everything I do today. So it was front of mind that he needs to be a leader in every domain in which he finds himself that day. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that in terms of, do we think of ourselves as a leader? And do we look for opportunities to exercise and practice leadership? I think a lot of those experiences are actually wasted for a lot of different reasons. So identity is really important in all of this. Identity motivates practice. Identity tells us not only who we are, what we value and what we believe in, but how we will allocate our resources, our scarce resources. And the scarcest resource of all is time. So with identity, it's not a singular thing. We have identities. We have multiple identities. And one of the things we need to do is to weld them into a coherent narrative. But one of the identities that I think everyone needs to take on to some degree is an identity as a leader. And by the way, the letting go to develop is something that I experience quite a bit with my MBA students over at the University of Western Australia, which is, a very resource-intensive part of the world. There's more engineers there per capita than anywhere else in the world. And one of the things that I find over and over and over again in my MBA classes is somebody who was the best engineer gets what? Promoted to become a supervisor of engineers. And yet their identity is, I'm an engineer. I'll solve all the engineering problems. And what do they find out? Their problems are about their team and the people. That's not about engineering. The letting go to develop is they've got to let go some of that identity of being a hotshot engineer. Let go, you got to, because it's not going to be helpful for you. It's not going to solve your problems. And take on other identities like being a leader. And finally, this last one, which is really so simple and so ignored. Feedback is crucial to learning and development. You need to learn how to seek feedback from those around you. You need to learn to give feedback to those around you. And I'm not just saying an attaboy, attagirl. I'm talking about concrete behavioral feedback that's delivered in a way where people don't become defensive about it. And one way to start with this, and most of us have, if I put you on a lie detector and said the word feedback, it would go whoop, whoop, whoop. You'd start sweating, your heart rate would go up, all these things that indicate that it's a distressing term, because most of the time we hear the word feedback only when what? We screwed up and somebody needs to kick our ass. Pardon my French. But when was the last time you gave somebody positive feedback? I mean, really concrete, positive feedback, objective feedback about what they did. And for most of us, it's hard to think of when that happened. And it's a shame because we have let learning slide. Every time that we don't reinforce what somebody has done well, we've robbed them of a developmental learning opportunity. So there are easy ways to learn how to give feedback, but then it comes back to this notion of practice. If you don't use it, if you don't practice it, you're not going to get good at it. And you are not going to be as effective as a leader as you can be. So revised assumptions about leadership. So going back to the very first, one of the first slides. Leadership is based on a science, but it has some artistry. And there's an analogy. It's like playing the piano. I can learn to play the notes. But what sets apart somebody who can just play the notes versus somebody who's a concert pianist? They emote emotions. They transfer those emotions from the keys to the audience. That's a lot like leadership. You can learn the science behind it, but it's really the artistry that will separate you from your peers. Leaderships are shaped both by nature and nurture. It's a dynamic and often informal process. Experience is everything and anything. We need to learn as much as possible from the experiences that we're in. And strengths-based leadership is dangerous. I'm not just saying it's ineffective, it's dangerous, as it leads to blind spots and potential derailment. Leadership is widely available in the population. We should be inclusive in our approaches to leadership development and not exclusive. In the mid-21st century, which is like coming up quicker than we would like, people will look back on our present practices as primitive. We can do better. I know we will do better. And with your help, we will lift not just our companies and our organizations, but our societies to be more effective in what we're trying to accomplish.